The Clear Light of Day, Part 25. We left Esme taking Ember back to Wiles Green in her car in the middle of the night in search of Jabez. There, coming up from the ditch, her headlights picked out a fox, sliding silently into the undergrowth, and alongside the field gate, the striped face of a badger watching them go by. When they reached Wiles Green and turned off the road, Ember suggested they park the car in the lane. There might be too little space to turn around in the yard with the way Jabez had left the truck parked, not expecting Esme to come tonight, she explained, and reassured Esme they would be in nobody's way. This seemed sensible enough, so they left the car in the lane and walked together along the path around to the kitchen door. "Freezing in here, stove's out," muttered Ember as she stepped into the house. "I left him in the living room," she added. Esme looked toward the door that led deeper into the house. No lights had been turned on, but in the living room maybe that was a glow of firelight she could see. With a sudden feeling of apprehension, guilty at the unhappiness she had caused, she went hesitantly through from the kitchen into the room beyond. Bright moonlight shone into the room and found the silver lights of Jabez's hair. He was sitting with Ember's blanket pulled around his shoulders, gazing at the glowing remains of the fire, very still. Even in the kindness of shadow and firelight, his face looked haggard and lost and old. "Jabez?" He looked up in amazement. "Esme?" He stared at her. "What time is it?" he asked, bewildered. "Nearly 2 o'clock, I think. Ember came to find me. She said you were really upset." He moved his hand in a vague gesture of deprecation. "I'm all right. What do you mean, she came to find you? Walked, you mean?" Esme nodded. "Yes, it's taken her hours. Jabez, can I put the lamp on? I can hardly see you." "Of course," he said. As she turned back to him from the light switch, he was blinking from the comparative brightness, and then as he adjusted to it, she looked at him more closely. His eyes baggy and bloodshot, his face ravaged from weeping. "Jabez, you look exhausted. You look absolutely done in. Oh, I'm so sorry about what I said. I didn't mean to hurt you so. It'll be all right. We can work something out." Ember appeared in the door behind her. "Exhausted? He's not the only one. And if he's tired, then it's time he was in bed. I'm going that way myself. You too, my love. I've brought you night things." "I beg your pardon?" Esme was beginning to feel out of her depth. "I brought your night things from your bed at the manse." "Have some sense, Esme. Look at the state of him. I'm tired. You're tired. He looks like he died last week. What did you hope to do? Try and have a conversation with him? You'll have to save that until the morning." But where will I sleep?" said Esme. Ember looked at her very hard. Well, not in my bed, for that's where I shall be in 5 minutes. You can work something out between you, I should imagine. Jabez pushed his hand, trembling with weariness, across his face and through his hair. I'd sleep on the sofa, he murmured. I don't think so, retorted Ember shortly. You've let the kitchen stove go out, and you don't look as though you're about to spring to your feet and build up the fire beside you. I certainly am not planning to forage for firewood at such an hour of the night, and I'll want my blanket for my own bed, thank you. 7 miles I've walked for you this night, Jabez Farrell. I fetched her back for you. I filched her night things out of her bedroom to satisfy your modesty. Pull yourself together. Think of a better way to keep warm. And with that she unbuttoned her coat and produced from within its folds Esme's nightdress, which she tossed onto the floor at his feet, dragged the blanket off his shoulders and trailed it behind her as she clumped up the stairs. They heard the decisive closing of her door. Jabez dropped his face into his hands. Oh my God. Esme heard his groan, muffled. She couldn't help laughing. Oh, for goodness sake, Jabez, it's not so bad. We're grown-up people. I'm 45. You're 68. I don't suppose it will wreak havoc with our innocence to share a bed together, will it? For one night? He didn't move. She stepped closer to him to pick up her nightdress, and as she stooped, she put her hand on his knee. Please, Jabez, let's go to bed. He rubbed his face and his eyes and then put his hand down to squeeze hers gently where it lay on his knee. He looked entirely dazed, bewildered with weariness and emotional exhaustion. Jabez? She said. Jabez sighed, a long, deep, shuddering sigh. He turned his head to look at her, and Esme had a sense of him drawing upon resources deep within, summoning the last dregs of energy to face this thing properly, say what he wanted to say. She knelt down on the floor beside him, waiting for him to frame what was inside him. His eyes, dark and deep, held hers, serious, all his soul looking out at her there. Esme, I understand the common sense of it. 'Tis late, I'm worn out, here are you, there's one bed. But it isn't as simple as that, is it? What's held out here is a possibility to be won. What Ember has in mind, and what you and me are not saying, is this isn't about sleeping, not one bit. It's about you and me making love. He smiled then and lifted his hand to her face, his fingertips delicately tracing the outlines of her cheek. Tired I may be, but if I let my mind dwell on that, I don't feel very sleepy, and I think you may know by now I wouldn't need much persuading. He hesitated a moment and then continued, finding the courage to be honest. I've been so lonely, Esme. At night in bed sometimes I could have wept for loneliness, just for a cuddle, to feel someone warm beside me. Some nights I've been lying here hugging the pillow for some comfort. I've been so terribly lonely. And I love you so much. It seems like forever I've longed for you and loved you. Only I never dared offer myself, because I've got nothing to give you, and I couldn't see how I could fit in with your life. What we're talking about now is what I've dreamed of, yearned for, wanted more than I can find the words to say. Don't you know that? Surely you could see. But for all that, I gotta say, I can't really approve of this. Love is something faithful, something that endures. If what you're planning is to move away from Wiles Green and leave me, then I think we'd do wrong to look for any kind of union more than the friendship we already have, and always will have. Oh, my dearest, you must know, my body's yours, and my love, and all that's mine to give if you'll have me. But I just think it should be not at all or forever. We gotta sort ourselves out first before we get into this. We gotta have an understanding. Esme, I can't reach out for something that's only a mirage, a union for only one night. It's too important to me. I love you too much for that. It will be unbearable. It will break my heart. Watching him, listening to him, Esme discerned the intensity of his soul, unconcealed in his eyes searching hers, and the vulnerable uncertainty of his mouth. Am I too old-fashioned? He said, anxious. Did you want us to... Do you mind? Esme smiled. Don't worry. I think it'll be all right, she said gently. We can talk about it in the morning. We've got each other. We've got time. It'll be okay. Remembering her first swift instinct that here was a man who would never cheat her, gratitude and trust quickened in the very roots of her soul for the honourable patience of his love. Then are we... He hesitated. I mean, do you want to be... Esme, what are we to one another? Esme did not reply. She lifted herself to kneel up close against him as he sat on the couch, taking him into her arms. She held him to her, her heart opening to a flood of protective love, moved to compassion for his defenceless longing for her and the humility of his self-offering. She stroked him gently, brushing her lips against his face, until with a small, half-suppressed groan of yearning, His mouth found hers, and he kissed her, hungrily, urgently, very thoroughly, she thought, for a man with so many reservations. Held close in the ardour of his embrace, she felt his heart beating against hers. It was answer enough. As he kissed her again, every trace of reserve in her melted. She closed her eyes and let her whole being open to his passion and tenderness, the exquisite gentleness of his love. He kissed her brow, her cheeks, her throat, lost in his wanting her, the irresistible hunger of his love. And then he just cradled her, his love enfolding her, for each of them, homecoming, heart's desire, completion. That's all right then, he said eventually, and he sat back on the sofa, looking at her in the lamplight, his eyes shining with the joy of finding himself loved. For tonight, sleep in my bed, my lady. I'll make up the fire down here. No doubt I've a bit of kindling in the kitchen, and I believe I may have another blanket if I look. Come on then, he said, as Esme stood up and he pushed himself up onto his feet. He stood a moment, letting his body adjust, cramped from sitting so long, and then took her hand and led her toward the stairs. We got no electricity upstairs, commented Jabez as she followed him up, but there's a candle in the bedroom. Esme felt the same sense of curiosity and excitement as she had on the first day he welcomed her into his cottage, as he opened his bedroom door and lit the candle that stood by a box of matches on the windowsill just within the doorway. The head of his bed, a big bed, his marriage bed, Esme thought, stood against the breast of the chimney that passed through on its way up from the living room below. A wardrobe with a simple door of boards had been built into the recess on one side of the chimney, and shelves crammed with books into the other alcove. In front of the bookshelves stood a small table with a glass of water. He turned back the covers of the bed. Here it is, then. I hope you'll be comfortable. And with gentle and humble simplicity, he took her into his arms and drew her to him one more time. He closed his eyes and pressed his lips against her forehead, moving his face tenderly against hers. Good night, my dearest, my darling, my love, he whispered. Sleep well. God bless you. She settled her head against the curve of his shoulder, and Jabez pressed his lips against her hair. Here in his cottage, held in his arms, Esme felt a sense of homecoming and peace. Time for bed, he said eventually, and smiled at her, leaving one last kiss on her brow. Jabez closed the door quietly behind him as he left her in his bedroom in the candlelight, and Esme listened to his footsteps on the stairs. She shivered as she changed into her nightdress and climbed into the cold, unfamiliar bed. It felt strange, and she missed him, wanting him there beside her. Downstairs, Jabez, who had lied about both the blanket and the kindling, turned out the light and curled up as best he could under such warmth as his coat offered for a covering on the couch. He didn't mind, but closed his eyes in peace. "Thank you," he whispered into the grateful dark. "Thank you, thank you. Oh, please, let me have this. Please don't let her leave me. Please don't let her go." And we got the last bit of our story tomorrow, and then we're done. I like Jabez Farrell. Who are the special people in your life? Who are the ones you really treasure? Your true companions on the journey? Are they the same as the people you live with? I read a thing once, very perspicacious, that said, not all members of the same family grow up under one roof. And I think that's very true. You can feel like an alien in your family of origin. You owe them a kind of duty of kinship, but you do not necessarily even love them. And then sometimes you meet a person on the journey who you feel you've known forever, and your souls recognise you, recognise each other on first meeting. Life is curious, isn't it? You don't find these things out, except with the passing of the years. Life isn't at all how I imagined it to be. It gets more and more full of questions and has fewer and fewer answers with every passing year. Heavenly Father, I pray that you will set the path for us, open the way for us, walk along it with us, and guide us safely home. Help us to live honourably, to be kind to those who share the journey with us, and to walk peacefully. Help us to trust you. Give us your gifts of serenity and contentment, and grant us the grace of choosing simplicity, which makes so many things possible that would be otherwise out of our reach. For I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I hope you have a good day. We're continuing with our long, slow wave swell of clearing and sorting and getting rid of things here. Our house gets steadily emptier, and we like it that way. Blessings on your day. Be blessed. May you be peaceful. May all go well with you, whatever your circumstances. May you be contented. May you be free.